Let's run through. It is March now, 2025, and Danny has been good enough again to pull numbers. We had a weird month in January, and let's see how February is doing. Danny, do you want to run through homes sold?
Yeah. So last month looked good. I mean, things rebounded. We kind of expected that was going to happen. That's kind of the seasonal trend. And you see that we went up from just over 1,200 homes sold in the month of January to just over 1,400 in February. So that's a good little bounce there. That's up 16% month over month. It's still down year over year, 11%. But if you scroll back to the left side of the page there, you see that it's a similar kind of a size of a leap, right? We were a little bit lower this year in January than last year. We bumped up to roughly the same degree. So definitely a positive sign that things are, kind of thawing out, and we're getting back into, out of the holidays and into kind of the selling season again.
Yeah, that was a big enough drop last month, 1,800 to 1,200. That was a big enough drop that it was concerning, but looks like it's still a seasonal effect. And we're doing the bounce, a little more inventory. And the good news is that the list to sales price number is starting to close.
Yeah, and this is a great chart because, again, this starts to show us kind of where homes are being listed versus where they're actually selling. And we always look at how those lines kind of play against one another when the market's not as hot. We see this kind of bigger separation, and the average sale price is going below the average list price. And you can see that that's been happening now for the past 4 or 5 months or so. And then this month, both lines kind of bounced back up a little bit. The average sales price bounced a little bit higher than the average list price did. And so that gap closed a little bit. A couple of other notable things were up about $2,500 month over month, which is about 1% in terms of the average sales price. But if you look back to this time last year, what are we up? A little over $17,000. So even though we have this seasonal pattern that continues to play out, if you look year over year, that's been very consistent. We're up about 5% over the prior year. And that's been a thing that's been very consistent for us for these last many months.
Yeah, and that's been consistent forever. We do have our seasonal ups and downs, but every year the house values continue to improve. We're expecting a big jump this month. Just so you know, we're getting into the spring market, guns blazing, and then the donut chart. We don't have comparisons on this, but this looks a little better than it did last month.
Yeah, it's definitely better than last month. I mean, last month that green section was almost non-existent. It was just 4% of the total pie. You see that that's bounced up to 7%. It really just traded directly with that orange. The orange was about, I think, 27% the month before. We're down to just 24%. And just as a reminder, those are sales that went 5% or more below asking. So that's changed, and the green is 5% or more above asking. So that's, again, a positive sign, and it reflects just more market activity and more competition.
Yeah, that's a really good sign as far as sellers go, right? A lot more houses are going for over asking versus below on that 5% margin, which is a big number. 500,000, that's 525 or more that it's sold for. So significant number. That number doubled. Days of the market is pretty similar. The median has dropped a lot, and I always think that's a better indicator than the average.
Yeah, definitely improvement there. And again, I think one of the things you called out in last month's video, which is a great point, was just, look, you've got houses that, let's say they get listed sometime in December. Who's actually out there shopping and buying things in the last 2 weeks of the year? The answer is almost no one. And what that does is it really just tacks on another 2 weeks to, otherwise what it would take to sell a house. And you see that manifested in the average and the median days on market for January. This month, things started to normalize. Things picked up a bit. You can see the average is still pretty high, but to your point, the median dropped. Our expectation is that's going to continue to drop month over month. Because again, that's part of just the seasonal pattern.
Right. And following the seasonal, sales with price reductions have dropped a lot. 10% drop over last month.
Big change. Yeah, big change.
That's a big one. And that is another indicator that we're getting to our spring market, which is typically one of the hotter markets. People are getting used to the rate, and realizing that if you have to move, it's time to move.
Yep.
Speaking of the rate, we recently had news that we were at 4-month lows within the last week, and that is 675. Danny, when you pull the numbers, you pull these at certain times, and this time when you pulled it, which I'm assuming is today, 6.76, which is lower on average than it has been most of the year.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah, and you look at a year ago it was 6.94. So this is all very encouraging. But I think more than just that kind of like improvement over the last year. I mean, you can see even just before that 6.94, we were still wasn't many months before that we were touching 8%. So things are still going in kind of a good direction. Kind of maybe range bound here a little bit in that high sixes range. But I think that's probably good for people because at least there's consistency and they can plan around that and take comfort in it. And maybe they've been just working with that number in mind for the last year now, right? And baking that into their purchasing power and their approach. So, I think that's good. And hopefully things continue to improve there.
Yeah, 4-month lows matters because they have definitely been above 7 more consistently, more often than they have not. That's not reflected on the chart necessarily, but I feel like 7 is the metric nowadays. I think a good, comfortable place for everyone to be would be around 6.5 or 6 even, and we're getting close to that. So as we go into the spring market, again, more inventory is coming on, lower rates. I think we're going to have a hot spring. I think the numbers are going to continue to improve, and we'll keep following it as we go. Again, we pull our own numbers. Danny's been good enough to pull the following zip codes repeatedly. We're not relying on MLS numbers because those include things from, Akron, Canton, which are not our area, and even Cincinnati. I've seen a couple near Kings Island. So, Danny, thanks for always tracking these, and we'll follow the selling trends into the spring. I expect those to go up, and if anything changes, we'll definitely let you know.